When Mark Neeld was relieved of his commission at Melbourne mid-season in 2013, the club had won 5 of 33 games under his coaching. Next weekend, just 5 years on, Melbourne will be playing finals. How does a sack coach feel when his old team comes good? Let's ask him. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Are you pleased for the Demons, or like some of us, does your pride tell you internally that you just hope they stay down forever?
Oh, I'm really pleased for them. My time in the AFL, I've met some great people, and there's still a number of people at Melbourne, on the field and off the field, that I've got good relationships with, shared some really tough times with. I'm pleased for them.
Were you treated harshly, Mark, did you think?
You mentioned before about the win and the loss. For me, I felt the role of myself and the coaching group there at the time was to redo the list. That was clearly going to happen, and then it was going to take some time to instill in them some really good behaviours. So, I think that's for other people to judge, Mike, to be honest.
Were you too hard too early? There's a view that you came in, I think the previous, or the people that were involved in the administration said, we need to toughen up, we need to overhaul the list, and we need to change the culture at this club. Did you go too hard?
Well, what you just said then, that was clear, the direction of that the football club wanted to take. That came through very clearly in the extensive interview process that I wouldn't have been the only person to go through it. Lots of people went through that. That was the desire. So there were decisions made about the composition of the list prior to my appointment in the way that the club wanted to go, and that was a lot of a lot of the experienced players and the older players either were going to be delisted then, or they were going to go, and the club wanted to invest in youth.
The most telling example of out with the old and in with the new was your decision to appoint Jack Grimes and Jack Trengove as co-captains in your first year. Grimes at 22, Trengove at 21. What motivated you to do that?
Yeah, lots of things. That was the culmination of a lengthy process. Again, so Neil Craig had a...
Sorry to interrupt. There you are there, and they look like two babies, don't they? They look like two teenagers.
Yeah, they do. Well, yeah, they weren't far beyond teenagers.
No, they weren't.
Yeah, so the process to appoint them was, again, working through with the whole player list and getting from them what is it that you want in leaders. So it was them being able to articulate the behaviours they wanted on a consistent basis, both on the training track, during matches, off the field. This is the type of leader that they wanted. And that took the whole pre-season to work through with them what they actually wanted. And then there were different things done in terms of getting other players to rate everybody on where they fitted. A number of the people, so the coaches also had a little bit of input into that. To me, it was a clear statement by the player group as to the type of person and the type of actions they wanted to lead. That's what it came down to. If you go to the board and explain this to them, they'll have some input into it. More importantly, if you go back to the players and you say that after 3 months of going through a process that spoke about actions, behaviours, what you want in a leader, they'll know who they rated. If you go in there and say, well, it's actually these 4 players and it's not the ones that they went for, how do you handle that situation? Can you actually look them in the eye and give them that feedback?
Was Brad Green, did he play on after in your first year?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. So he was the captain previously.
Yep.
How did you handle dumping him for 2 kids?
Yeah. See, well, I wouldn't say that he was dumped.
Well, he was the captain.
He was the captain.
And he was relieved of that.
Yeah, well, I think that all leadership positions were open. Brad was aware of that, and that sat, the information or the discussions that I had with Brad, that sat well with him, that they were all open. He just wanted to see how his teammates rated his behaviours.
Is it fair to say that Gary Lyon got you the job at Melbourne?
I don't think so. I don't know. You'd have to ask the people.
That's my understanding.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, Gary's a powerful personality.
Yeah,
and a big figure in Melbourne's history.
Yeah.
And I think there were probably 3 who decided it: Gary, Cameron Swab, and Don McClarty.
Yeah. Well, they were certainly. Gary and Cam were part of the majority of the interviews that were through that process. Don joined late. You go through a whole heap of different things that you have to do. Don joined late. But so what you're saying, that makes sense, given that those two guys, Cameron and Gary, were part of nearly every interview that I had.
I must say, in fairness, some people said that you weren't ready. I would have thought your apprenticeship was almost perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd coached at under-18 level, you'd coached in country football, and you'd been an assistant coach under Mick Malthouse for 4 years at Collingwood.
Yeah.
So there's not much more you can do to learn the job, is there?
Oh, there's always more.
Yeah.
At the same time, it was my decision to believe that I was ready to put my hand up to go through the process, and then the people on the panel, it was up to them to make their decision, which they did.
When it started to not unravel, because Melbourne hadn't been strong anyway, but when you weren't seen to be making any progress in the first year, how did you feel? Did you think it was going to be a long-term project and you were okay with that, or were you starting to get a bit disturbed?
No, I always thought it was going to be a long-term project, and I was really clear on how I wanted the group to play and what that was going to look like. I believe there were some things that were starting to happen that we could see, which was good. Still really keen to develop the standards off the field going into the second pre-season. I thought that was good. There was always going to be perhaps a dip in the second year due to I think the clean out. I can't remember the exact number, but let's say there was about 10 to 12 people on the list that were changed over, and the majority of people that came in were young. So I was confident that it was still going to be a long-term project, but we're on the right track.
So you get to mid-season.
Yeah.
After 11 rounds, you've won one.
Yep.
Was the dismissal a shock to you?
It wasn't, only because again, I'm big on, in footy clubs, you need alignment between key people. And when Cameron Schwab was removed as CEO, there was a shifting of ideas, not a complete shifting of direction, but Cameron was fantastic in supporting, saying this is going to be a long-term proposition. We're going to blood, go ahead, and the list is going to be go with the young kids. It's going well. I can see things changing, those types of things. And when key personnel get removed, there is a little bit of, hang on, I wonder how this is going to go. So the CEO went, and then Don McClarty put out that he was going to move on as president. And then you think, well, there's chances of being a big shift here. So it wasn't a complete shock from that point of view.
Mark, your last 3 games, you lost by a total number of points equivalent to 44 goals. Now, that's stark, isn't it? I mean, when you put it in that context, that must have concerned you about the direction.
Well, when you're coaching I'm not so sure, because when you're coaching a team that is particularly young and light on experience, you do have some options. You can put everyone behind the ball. Yes. If you like, and stop that. And we discussed not putting everyone behind the ball, maybe playing with +2 in defence, or at times a +3, you push your winger back, whatever the decision is made. I was big on, look, I didn't want to do that. I just didn't think that in the long run the group would get much out of that.
What did you learn from what from the outside was an horrendous 18 months at Melbourne? What did you learn about yourself and about coaching?
Yeah, learn a lot. It was a really good learning experience. In terms of, people often ask, would you do things differently? I would have asked more questions of myself and more questions of the interview panel in terms of, when I was told this is the direction the club's going to take. We've made some decisions already on some senior experienced players. They're not going to see much of your coaching. They're not going to take us forward. I didn't question that enough, and therefore, so when I started to coach, my energies, clearly I would have spent more time delving in and finding out more about the experienced players.
As to whether they could help you or not.
Yeah. I think that was, for me, that was a key thing, which then leads into massive changes of a list straight away under a new coaching group. Hindsight says you might want to be a bit more subtle in that. I think they're pretty much the learnings.
When you finished at Melbourne, you had a 3-year contract, did you not?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Were you paid out?
Yes.
In full?
I think so. Yeah.
You'd know that, wouldn't you?
Well, Probably. Well, in terms of...
Your wife would have known that.
But there's certain things in a contract... I don't know the definition of full. Yeah, I pretty much got it all, which is good. Yeah.
How was your self-esteem? I mean, there's the scrutiny on coaches. Well, I don't have to tell you this.
Yeah, no.
But how intense it is. How was your self-esteem when you've been dumped by a club down the bottom of the ladder?
Yeah, I think initially it does take... It can take its toll. Initially, managed to. I'm a big one for okay. You got to move forward. Everyone keeps going forward. What can I learn from that will put me in better position moving forward? So, was in a good position in terms of Sarah and I went away for a little while. So took off overseas. Very fortunate position to be able to do that. So that was great. Sarah happened to be at a health resort on the island of Koh Samui. So I got home after having a very short chat with Peter Jackson and thought, well, I'm the only one in the house and I don't actually have to go to training tomorrow. Well, okay, I'm on a plane. So I took off over there and it was a very funny experience. Effectively, within 24 hours of being an AFL head coach, I was at Koh Samui at a health resort where it was not quite a starvation health resort, wasn't far off. There was a fair bit of yoga going on. I didn't go too well in the first yoga class. The guy asked me to leave. He was trying to explain to me about concentration and you've got to visualise this, and that didn't go too well. So that was quite interesting. But came back from there really refreshed. We were away for a few weeks, and then it was okay. What am I going to do? And I finished up with the help of the Coaches Association, getting a bit of direction in terms of what I wanted to do next. So I went and did some study at New York Uni, which I found really beneficial.
Study of what?
I used it. So I started studying business at New York Uni. Really enjoyed it. Completely opens up. You said about the scrutiny on AFL coaches. I think the scrutiny on the AFL industry is extreme, and I wanted to use the time post the Melbourne coaching experience wisely, but I wanted to step out and just have a look at things. And it is extreme scrutiny, as you say, but there is a big wide world out there. So I managed to experience that for a little while, which I was really grateful for.
You ended up at Essendon.
Yep.
You had 4 years with the Bombers.
Yep.
Yeah. As assistant to John Worsfold.
Yep.
And initially to James Hird.
Yeah, Hirdy, yes.
Yeah. I was interested, you made some observations about Hirdy at the height of the supplement saga.
Yeah.
And you said he was the saga, quote, your quote, ripped into shreds.
Yeah. So I started at Essendon. My first role at Essendon was head of development under Hirdy, and again, completely different. So that was, I got to work with, I really got to work with the first to third years program, but with the development coaches. So again, not a hands-on role, and so I really enjoyed that aspect. Hirdy had, and he still does, I'm sure. He had some great ideas on coaching, some great ideas on how he wanted the game to be played and how he thought it should be played. He's a really good person to talk to about football, but the but would be in that instance. I arrived at Essendon when everyone had thought, well, pretty much the supplement saga was just about done, but it clearly wasn't. And look, it was a distracted footy club. AFL footy's really difficult to succeed when everything is going well, let alone where there's a massive amount of distraction that makes it particularly difficult.
You saw him change? You saw the personality of Hirdy change in front of you?
No, not so much Hirdy's personality, but it was his time at the start when I started with Hirdy. Like everybody was, a very energetic person, loves footy, and was talking about this is where we can get the group, and we've got a really good crop of youngsters coming through, which are now playing some really good footy. So in that group, Zach Merritt, Danaher, Fantasia, that group that was coming through, he was really excited for their development and where they could take the club. So that was initially, and then, yeah, as you said before, the scrutiny, not just on the footy performance, but what was going on with the supplement saga, it took its toll on everybody, including Hirdy.
Mark, at 2-6 this year, the Bombers are struggling. They're behind where most of us thought they should and would be.
Yep.
And you're relieved of your job there.
Yeah.
Now, you're close with Woosha.
Very close, yeah.
I can't understand how that can happen. How, if the coach wants you there and the coach has appointed you to that role, how he's his will doesn't prevail?
Yeah, okay. So a little bit, my role, so you mentioned it before, you described it as an assistant coach. It was not a coaching role I had at the Bombers, so it was not really, it's certainly not tied to the season as such, if that makes sense. So the role I had at the Bombers came about when James left Essendon and Woosha was appointed. There was a extensive review, as all reviews are, and the role that I finished up taking on came out of that review and with the appointment of Woosha. Woosha brought with him a new coaching structure for the Bombers, one that he was based on the success that he'd had at the Eagles. Mm-hmm. And he also brought with him a very different education style, education philosophy that what had been in place previously at the Bombers. So the role that he wanted me to play was working between the coaching group, the recruiting group, the medical staff and the sports science staff. So he described it as having a person who worked between all the silos. And the idea was to bring people along for the journey. The first thing was to explain the new coaching structure and how he wanted it to work, and then to go through his education philosophy to get everybody on the same page. I did get asked a lot, that sounds like something the head coach should be doing. Why was the head? So John is meticulous in his planning and his reasons, and I asked him that question prior to taking on the role. And he was enormous in his time as a head coach, that particular role had expanded significantly, and he still viewed the most important thing as being able to spend time with 45 of his players. And he felt by putting people in certain roles that it didn't mean that what we were doing was any less important because he didn't value it as his number one thing. It meant that he could do his job.
The one-on-one stuff.
Yeah. So I've had some great experiences in footy and working with a long time with Mick Malthouse, mm-hmm. and then his captain of the Eagles in John, getting to work with him, I thought was quite a fascinating contrast. They're very different people, but at the same time I could see some similarities in certain aspects, one of which was John's attention to detail and his belief of know your role, play your role, once that was explained. So my coaching box role, John again went through with everybody. He asks a lot of questions and draws information out, and when he hears everyone's information, puts it together. He had written really meticulous bullet point role descriptions of what he wanted everybody to do in the box. Again, it's not earth-shattering. Every senior coach wants his, or for other sports, wants her coaching box to operate in a certain way. Ultimately, it's Woosha's team, and he needs to be given the information that he wants to coach it to the best of his ability. So he had some role descriptions for every person in the box. The biggest one that I had was to ensure that everybody was adhering to those role descriptions. The manner in which he did that, again, being part of the inquiry education system rather than the tell education system. The idea was, well, not the idea, I had a number of questions that I'd ask people, and the idea was that to answer those questions, they had to be watching the part of the ground that John wanted.
People were the assistant coaches?
Yeah, well, assistant coaches, analysts, okay. Opposition coach, they're the people that, again, same as all other coaching boxes. Most coaching boxes have a box manager, or depending on the head coach.
So why were you dumped then? I mean, if you were doing the job and coordinating the material from the assistant coaches to the coach, what happened?
Yeah, okay, so it was great alignment between Rob Kerr when he was GM of football and Woosha with regards to the structure. And then when Rob left at the end of last year, we had a new footy manager come in, Dan Richardson, came in Feb this year perhaps, around about that time, came from Richmond. He was not aligned to Woosha's structure. So the non-alignment.
But doesn't the coach's view prevail about how the team is coached and what he wants?
Again, it was something that I'd had some discussions with a lot with John, obviously. Had some discussions with Dan just about, where does your future lie, those sorts of things. The role that I had was a great role. I really enjoyed it. The reason I made a decision to go down sports management, administration plan, and that's not a secret. Like I said to you before, when I left Melbourne, did some study at New York Uni, came back, got enthused about that, so doing an MBA. So it was really clear where I was going, and probably the biggest part of me taking the role was that it was a significant management role in the sports administration area, which is where I want to go. Gave me a little bit of toe in the water still with coaching, but not massively. It was more around the coaches and the game plan and strategy, which I enjoyed, and working with the younger coaches to help develop them into being coaches into the future. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. So it wasn't something that was all of a sudden going to work, bang, we're going to change, you're out.
The view from the outside, Mark, I'm not saying it was universal, but there was a school of thought that it said Mark Neeld had too much control in the box, that no one could talk to Woosha except you, and that everything had to be funneled through you. Is that, how much substance is there to that?
Oh, not a great deal. I think the reason I chuckled a little bit, I actually rang the journalist who wrote that article. I've been around a long time. I've only ever called 2 journos about, just to check, not to check where they got the information from, but just maybe to suggest not a bad idea if you triangulate your data. And I didn't mean to upset the journo. I just asked. I said, look.
So in this instance, who are we talking about?
It works here, I think. Tom Morris.
Tommy, yeah.
Little Tommy Morris.
Yeah.
So I just had a quick chat with Tom and just suggested, nicely, absolutely. I said, mate, I reckon you could have checked your info just a little bit more.
So his premise was incorrect.
Yeah, well, his premise to say that I was, whatever you said before, didn't let anyone talk to Woosha.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. So the way that, again, it's as simple as my role in the box was to ask people questions to ensure that they were giving John the information that he wanted. And
then you would pass that on to John?
No, it's not a big... No, it's not, because it's not a big box. You can hear, you could hear what's going on.
So Woosha didn't say, there was no edict that none of the other coaches could speak to him directly during a game? No. No. Okay.
That doesn't happen.
Okay. How'd you feel about that? I mean, that's just I suspect at one point you loved the idea of being a long-time coach in the AFL, and you had the Melbourne setback, and then Essendon this year. How do you cope with those things?
Yeah, the Essendon one, no problem, because, again, it was something that we talked about for a while, and when different people come in, if the new GM of footy says, look, I think half of the role that you're doing, I really think the senior coach could do, and I know that you want to head down the administration path at the moment, I think this structure has served its purpose. Okay. It's come in. That's no worries at all.
Okay. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but you did have a career, didn't you, on the field?
Yeah,
you
I
played at Geelong and Richmond.
Long time ago.
Yeah, 70-odd games.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in 1991. The Cats are a good team, finished third.
Yep.
You played 21 games that year, including 3 finals.
Yeah.
Now, I think that was the year you turned 20 that year, I reckon.
Yes, that'd be right.
So if I said to someone, this kid's just about to turn 20 and he's a fixture in this team that's going to finish top 4, you'd think he'd have a long future ahead of him. What happened?
Many things happened in a footy career. That was a great year. We do... unfortunately, that year for the Cats, we got beaten in a prelim. We played the Eagles. It was good. I remember at one stage nearly drowning because Woosha had me in a headlock. I don't know what I was doing down that end of the ground. I got lost and Woosha decided to put me in a headlock and nearly drowned me, so I quickly returned to the back pocket. A whole heap of things happen in people's career. There were a couple of injuries. Sarah and I had children young, which is awesome. We've got a really close family, have 3 daughters. We had them really young, so that plays a part.
You were coached by Blighty.
Yep.
And you played with Gazza.
Yes.
Yeah. What's your favourite story about either or both of those?
Oh, favourite story.
How was Blighty with you? Was Blighty?
I love Blighty, and I still do. He was, and now having been a coach and doing sports admin stuff, he was before his time. Some of the things that he'd talk about footy at that stage, people would go, well. But now you see, decision making and game sense stuff and all things like that back then no one knew what he was talking about. but he was just brilliant. And he had this unbelievable ability, Blighty. No matter the result on the weekend, no matter, you know, it was a great win or it was a loss that you thought you could have won, whatever it is, by the time you got to training on Monday and by the time you left the change room to go out and train, Blighty had everyone in the whole club convinced that we were going to win.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. My favourite story about Blighty, and again, I've heard this told by a few people, and people always whack a little bit of mayo on it, but I played the day. We were playing Sydney at Cardinia Park, and we arrived at the ground. You put your bag in the rooms, and then he said, right, we're going. So we walked out of the change room, out of the gate, and like if you're a supporter coming to the footy and you can see, back then, I don't know, what would have been 2 on the bench or 3 on the bench, whatever it was, 21 players heading out of the ground. We got in the minibus and we went up to a house not far, just off Latrobe Terrace, not far from Cardinia Park. And it was a house that I think it belonged to one of the board of directors or something. In the house, out the back, to the pool room, like beside the pool, whatever the right
Pool as in...
No. So swimming pool, and then the room beside the swimming pool.
Yep.
We legitimately sat around in a circle. We did... I've heard people... I'll have to run with... I think we had towels on our head, but you could still see. There's been a few cartoons drawn about it. And then there was again, I've heard people say that they passed around a pipe. Incorrect. It was just a stick, and it was a talking stick. You had to pass it around and say whatever it was you were going to commit to.
So you talked into the stick?
Yeah, it was like, so here's the stick, Mick, Mike, it's your turn to talk. Everyone else be quiet. It was just a simple, symbolic thing. This is what I'm going to do for you guys today. So we're all sitting around, including Gary Ablett. So we all said whatever we had to say. He said, right, let's go. Got in the minibus, went back to Cardinia Park, went out in the ground and beat Sydney. It was unbelievable.
What did you say? What did you say to the stick?
Yeah, I think young back pocket player would have been about minding my man and doing the right thing, and would have been stuff.
What did Gazza say?
Commit.
I'm going to kick 12?
Oh, no, he wasn't like that. He would have said something along the lines of, if you can get the ball in my area, boys, I'll look after it, which is one of his favourite lines.
Mark, it's been an eventful time in footy for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
I mean, the coaching situation didn't turn out as you would have liked, but you've played and you've coached and you've had a crack at it.
Yeah.
And you've done it at the top level and the lower level, so good on you for doing that. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thank you.